to do that. Okay, we're recording. Okay, great. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, let's move on to number 2. So number 2 is, let me check. Number 2 is be able to identify the major texts / trustees of each of the above philosophers. So the aforementioned philosophers in question 1. Let's go ahead and go through that. So really, we'll start off with Plato and Aristotle again. As soon as you hear the name Plato, the book that you should definitely memorize him for is called The Republic. Probably one of the most famous works in Western philosophy, definitely associated with Plato. That's, of course, where we get all the cool ideas, such as, the divided line, the allegory of the cave, sort of definition of justice. It's a very important work. And then, of course, for Aristotle, what we have is we have the book of Metaphysics and Nicomachean Ethics. Probably more so remember Nicomachean Ethics. It's essentially Aristotle's magnum opus. It's his entire ethical theory summarized into one book. Definitely memorize that one. And then Metaphysics. And then, of course, we have Plotinus. Plotinus, his most famous book is the Aeneid. And then we have Anselm, and his famous book is the Proslogion. And for Thomas Aquinas, it's the Summa Theologica. And then we have finally Augustine in his 2 most famous works of City of God and Confessions. Okay, and I'll leave this one up for a little bit, and we'll move on to probably the most esoteric part of this review, the divided line by Plato. Okay, I'm assuming everyone has it. I'll go ahead and move on to number 3. Okay, so for this one, how am I going to do this? I'm a horrible drawer, so hopefully this works out. Okay, I'm sorry. I just read chat. Can I show number 1 again? Yeah, I'll go ahead and show number 1 again real quick. Let me get to it real quick. So for the main interests of each philosopher, we have Plato. His main subjects were epistemology, metaphysics, and ethics.
Someone put it in the chat, so you don't have to retype all of it.
Okay, great. Awesome. Well, thank you, Allison, for doing that. That's great. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Okay, so move on to number 3 then. I'll try to pay attention to chat more. Sorry about that. That's my bad. Yeah, moving on to number 3. So number 3, again, one of the most abstract parts of Plato's philosophy, right? We have the divided line, and I'll try to hit on just the main points for each section. I'll try not to bog you down with too much information on it, just the main points that you'll need to remember for the test in particular. So hopefully I don't butcher this too much. Try to create 4 sections here. Okay, so Plato essentially instructs us to create 4 sections and to divide each section one more time. So in total, we have about 2, 4, 6, 8 different sections, right? Each having their own, I guess you would say, type of information and importance. So really what I want you to know about each of the 4 sections, these main 4 sections right here, is that this first section, the one to the bottom right, is really kind of the branch of metaphysics. Let me try to line it real quick. So this branch to the right is the realm of metaphysics, and then the section to the left is the branch of epistemology. And then the upper left one is the branch of logic. And then the rightmost upper branch is or section is the branch of axiology. So really, again, just remember that for the 4 sections in particular, what we have is we have the 4 main branches of philosophy. We start with metaphysics to the bottom right, and then to the bottom left, we have epistemology. In the upper left corner, we have logic, and then the upper right corner, we have axiology. So make sure you remember that it's sort of each of the 4 branches of philosophy has a place in the divided line. Then, of course, we start with the rightmost branch, the branch of metaphysics. And really what you should know about this lower branch is that, or this lower section, I should say, is it's the sort of realm of shadows, the realm of images. And then this upper section right here is the section of physical objects / experiences. Then we move to the leftmost branch to the bottom, and what we have at this bottom section is the section of illusion / conjecture. And then, of course, for the upper section, we have belief. Then we'll go ahead and we'll start with, or we have to start with logic. And the bottom section of logic has to do with Socratic dialect and mathematical reasoning. Let me try to shrink this real quick. And then this upper section, what we have is we have understanding. Then we move to the final section, which is axiology. And the lower part of axiology is really kind of the section of the sciences. And then, Plato's most important idea, probably his what would be his final end to his philosophy, is really the section of the higher forms, and that's exactly what this upper section is for axiology. So it's the higher forms. And so, really, what all this is supposed to mean is it's supposed to be a connection of all of Plato's philosophy, from his metaphysics, epistemology, logic, and axiology, and how exactly they interact with each other. We start with metaphysics, in which we start to understand that what we know as reality, as we see it, is really just shadows or images, and that we have to go beyond it and start to understand physical objects slash experiences in their own right. And then through epistemology, what we have is we have first illusion slash conjecture, and what we try to move from that into actual belief, which is sort of not total understanding, but it is something a little bit more reasonable, something a little bit more truthful, right? And then we move to logic, and for logic in particular, we use Socratic dialect slash mathematical reasoning to concrete, make our beliefs a little bit more concrete and a little bit more truthful. And then from Socratic dialect slash mathematical reasoning, we start to truly understand things about reality, about goodness, about essentially everything. So then we go to understanding, and then we go from axiology, which is sort of the sciences, the lower forms. We're not quite at what we would perceive as the higher forms, which are just really perfect archetypes that are able to kind of reflect to reality and give us knowledge of essentially everything in reality. So we move from the sciences to the highest forms within axiology. That's probably really out of this world and abstract. It is extremely abstract, but just note that this whole thing about the divided line is really just to show that Plato is trying to make connections between the four branches of philosophy. He's trying to uh, conceive of what is the highest forms, what is truly good, what is truly real, what is truly true, and all of that, right? And so, hold on, let me get some water real quick. Really what this starts to look like is another theory that Plato had. So let me draw this line right here. Really what this looks like is it looks like the two worlds theory as well. And it's very important that you know that in this realm, the upper realm, really what this is called is it's called the intelligible realm. So let me write that down. Or world, rather. You can say realm or world. It doesn't really matter. And then at the bottom level, what we have is we have the physical world. And really, for the intelligible world and the physical world, what Plato believes is that for the physical world, really all you can have is just mere opinions. So remember that. Remember that with the physical world, we really only have opinions. And for the intelligible world, what we have is true knowledge. Oops. And what Plato would also say is that he makes an analogy of the sun. You might remember this from many of your classes. What Plato tries to surmise through analogy is that for the physical world, we can see things through the sun. But for the intelligible world, we can see things through the good. So let me go ahead and draw that. He kind of makes it to where it's kind of like a little sun. Hopefully I can draw that. Let me draw this first, or type this first. Let's see the good. the sun, and I'll make a really horrible sun.
Why does he call it the sun?
So really it's exactly what it is, right? So in the physical world, we're able to see things through the sun. We have visibility of the outside world through the sun. Whereas, and really, it's what he's trying to do is he's trying to make an argument from analogy, basically saying that we're able to see things in the world, the physical world, through the sun, but in the intelligible world, the realm of logic and axiology, and specifically the higher forms, we're able to see them through the good. So he's trying to make a sort of analogy, saying that you see things through the sun in the physical world, but you see things as they are in the intelligible world through the good.
Thank you.
So let me draw that. And so that's basically it. For the divided line. There's some other information that's within the divided line, but I don't think you'll really need to know that for your test. Really, the main things that you should know is that we have 4 sections: metaphysics, epistemology, logic, axiology, and then we have a divided line through each of the 4 sections, in which we have a lower realm in metaphysics, which is shadows and images, and then the higher realm, physical objects / experiences. Epistemology, the lower realm, is illusion / conjecture. Then we go to the higher realm, which is belief. For logic, we have Socratic dialect / mathematical reasoning, and then we move to the upper realm of understanding. And then for axiology, we have the sciences, or lower forms, and then we move to the higher form, which is really the whole point of all of this. It's to understand the higher forms, the perfect archetypes of, the platonic heaven. And then just remember that, you can, when you divide the 2 realms, the realms of epistemology and metaphysics, with logic and axiology, what you have is you have the intelligible world, in which true knowledge is conceived, and then the bottom level, or bottom world, which is the physical world and is the world of only opinions. And each one is known through, respectively, the good and the sun. So this is really all you really need to know for the test. I know it's extremely abstract, but Plato had his ways with trying to explain his philosophy through analogy, and trying to interconnect it with all 4 branches. So really important to understand for Plato.
So with the left and the right, is there any distinction that we need to make between the two? Is there any names between the left and the right? Because the top and the bottom is the intelligible and physical worlds. What about the left and the right?
Really, for the left and the right, all you really need to know is that you have logic and epistemology to the left, and axiology and metaphysics to the right. There's no real separation from left to right, as there is with the upper part to the bottom, right? So you have the intelligible world and the physical world,
Okay.
top to bottom. So
Thank you.
So I know this is a lot. I'll give it just a minute, 2 minutes or so, just to make sure that everyone has it. Okay. Okay, I think that should be good. Hopefully everyone has it down. I'm gonna go ahead and erase it now. Okay, so now we move on to number 4, and let me make sure that I know what number 4 is. So number 4 is be able to reproduce Plato's just, healthy, harmonious city and soul analogy, including the joint virtues that both city and soul require. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So this one is very simple. McDowell wanted me to tell you guys specifically that a lot of students actually end up missing this question. For this question, just like number 3, what you really have to do is you have to memorize everything that I put on the screen. So really, for this analogy in particular, what we're trying to analyze is what are the sort of similarities between a just city and the just soul? How are they organized, and what sort of virtues are needed for each section of a just soul in a just city for it to truly be just? So let's go ahead and start with the. Actually, how am I going to do this? I guess I'll start with this. So we have the just city. I'll just go over here. We have the just soul. Oh, great. That totally messed it up. Sorry about that, guys. Here, this will actually be more simple. I'll go ahead and start with each section of the just city and just soul instead of having to do it. Or actually, no, I could just do it like this. So you have a just city. So within the just city, what we have is we have the guardians, the auxiliary or the soldier class, and then we have the worker class. So we move it over here. Okay. Okay. And then we have a just soul. Let me put it over here. And for the just soul, what we have is we have the rationale or the rational. We have the spirited / passionate. And then we have the appetite. Let me try to line these up as best I can. Okay. So then we have the virtues which sort of connect the just soul and the just city together. So let's go ahead and write them down. We have wisdom. Let me actually put it over here. Okay. So wisdom, courage, and temperance. And so really for this analogy, what we have is we have Plato really kind of ordering what a just city and a just soul has. For the just city, we have the guardians, which looks over the auxiliary and worker class. For the just soul is the fact that they have wisdom. Oh, sorry, guys. It says that my internet connection is bad. I hope I'm not lagging. Just let me know if I am lagging in the chat, or just say it. And if I happen to,
last part got cut off for me.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was like frozen for like a few seconds.
Okay, dang. Is it good now?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
no.
Okay, great. If I happen to disconnect, I should be right back. Okay, but hopefully I don't. And then, of course, for the auxiliary class, we have courage, and for the spirited / passionate, that also needs courage in order to be virtuous. And then the worker class needs temperance, and the appetite needs temperance to truly be virtuous, to truly be in order. So yeah, it's it's pretty simple idea. The guardians, they need wisdom. The rationale needs wisdom in order to supersede, the rest of the parts of the soul in the just city. The auxiliary needs courage in order to, do what they need to do, just as how the spirited / passionate needs courage to do what it needs to do. The worker class and the appetite need temperance in order to ensure that they're not, doing things that it's not supposed to do, that they're not overindulging, things of that nature. But again, McDowell told me that a lot of students happen to get this question wrong, but it's very simple. You just need to remember the different classes and which classes are connected to what virtue. So as long as you remember this, you'll be fine.
On the test, can we do like a web thing like that, like draw like a little hyphen in between each level, or we have to like actually write like a paragraph?
I actually don't know. It might have to be. It depends on what the question really is. If it just kind of says, would demonstrate the just soul and just city analogy, then maybe, yeah, all you have to do is draw a web and just kind of explain at the bottom, the guardians and the rationale are connected through wisdom. They need wisdom in order to be ordered, in order to be truly just. And you can say the same thing about, every other class with, its respective virtue. But it really kind of depends on what the question asks. I would read the question, carefully, just in case. And I think everyone should have this by now, so I go ahead and I'll erase it. Okay, so then number 5. Let's see, what's number 5? Let me get to. Probably should bring it. Okay, so number 5, be able to explain Plato's charioteer analogy of the soul and its relation to order and disorder in the soul. So another very famous analogy that Plato has, it's the analogy of the charioteer. Really, for this analogy, what we have is we have kind of what we were going through in number 4. The rational needs to be able to sort of control the appetite, the spirited, in order to really have a ordered soul. So let me go ahead and draw that out real quick. And try and draw a chariot of sorts, or not chariot, but just a little connection between these guys. And really, what you should know about this whole analogy is that the soul is ordered as long as the rational controls the spirited and the appetite. And if any of the other two, as in the spirited or the appetite, controls the rational, the soul will be in disorder. So let me go ahead and write that down. Or really, instead of saying just the rational, it really should be the other two. Just a little correction. Yeah. So yeah, this should be about it for the charioteer analogy. Really, what you should just make sure that you know is that the rational needs to be in control of the spirited and appetite, so that way we can make rational choices. We can do what's good. We can live by reason in order to be virtuous. And if the spirited or appetite are in control of the other two, then necessarily the soul will be in disorder, as we don't live by what's rational, instead by what is more so emotional, what is more so spirited and appetite. Okay, I'm going to assume everyone is okay for me to erase it.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So then we move on to number 6. So let's see. Number 6 is be able to identify the basic characteristics of Platonic thought, including forms, intelligible world / physical world, knowledge / opinion, and Platonic virtues, etc. So basically a whole overview of the thoughts of Plato. Really, I don't want to go through, well, of course, I don't want to go through the divided line all over again, but it's a very important idea of Plato, which, definitely connects with this question as well. Just kind of, revert back to number 3, for the divided line explanation. But we'll go ahead and we'll go through the other ideas that he has. Let's start with the Platonic virtues. So for Plato, or actually Platonic virtues, you did learn about how Aristotle had his own set of virtues. Aristotle held that virtues is that which lives in the mean of excess and deficiency. For Plato, he didn't really necessarily have anything like that. He had very standard virtues to live by, and those virtues are wisdom, justice, temperance, and courage. Let me extend that a bit. That's really the virtues that you should know by him. Those are his 4 main virtues. It's really all you need to know. It's a lot more simple than Aristotle's. Aristotle has a whole long list of the virtues, right? Whereas Plato, he really has 4 main virtues that you should know. So then, of course, we have instead of a divided line, we have the divided line of knowledge and opinion. It's kind of like a sort of like a little table. Probably can do that right here. Knowledge. So really, the main point of knowledge, or really the main attributes of knowledge that Plato will say about it, is that knowledge is something that endures. And from being something which endures, it's essentially always true. And it's also a result of instruction. And it's also backed by reason. Let me do this. Probably can't make a table. Oh yeah, I can. Let me just do this. Sorry guys, give me 1 second. Do this. Okay, that works out. So then we have opinion. And whereas knowledge is that which endures, opinion is that which changes. And for opinion, whereas knowledge is always true, opinion could be true or false. And instead of being the result of instruction, opinion is the result of persuasion. And of course, opinion is something that is not backed by reason. So that's really it for the divided line of knowledge and opinion. We can move on to now is the physical world and the intelligible world. Something that is on the divided line. However, we don't really go through it or go into what exactly the worlds are in the divided line. We can do so here in this question. So for the physical world, really what it is the world of change. It's the realm of shadows, and it's specifically the home of epistemology and metaphysics. Let me try to extend that. Then we have the intelligible world. And that, of course, is unchanging. It houses the realm of, or is the realm of the perfect forms. And its main concern is logic and axiology. Sorry, guys, just trying to move it. So yeah, physical world and intelligible world. And really, that's about it. Let me see if I'm missing anything else, actually. Forms. Yeah, that's about it. Just really all you should note is that, there's the platonic virtues. There's a difference between knowledge and opinion. For the physical world, it's changes, the realm of shadow. Epistemology and metaphysics is mostly concerned with this world. For the intelligible world, it's unchanging. It's the realm of the perfect forms, and it's of axiology and logic. I'll go ahead and leave this up for just a second. All right, I'm going to assume everyone is all good. I'll go ahead and start racing it now. Okay, so number 7, let's see what number 7 is. Be able to summarize and explain the key elements of Plato's myth of the cave, demonstrating how each level of reality / knowledge correlates with the divided line. Okay, so essentially just like the divided line, very esoteric, very abstract, and the allegory of the cave really takes a lot from, or is mostly takes from the divided line. And so let's see, how am I going to draw this out? I guess I can start with a line like this. That's horrible. We'll go ahead and do it like this. So what I have written down right now is essentially a sort of representation of the allegory of the cave. of course, I don't want to give you just like a whole paragraph, just explaining what it is. I kind of want to make a visual representation of what it is, so that way it's a little bit more digestible, right? So really, we have the main sort of division in the middle. What we have is we have one section, which is the section of the cave, and the other section, which is a section of the outside. So we have the cave. Okay. Cave. And I can put that right there. Then we have the outside. And really, note from the allegory of the cave, really the cave is supposed to represent the visible realm, or the realm of opinion. And then for the outside, what it's trying to represent is the intelligible realm / knowledge. And so you can kind of see the the similarities between the divided line and the allegory of the cave, right away. So we have the visible realm, which is the same as the divided line, where the bottom world is the physical world, or the visible world, and then of course we have the top of the world, or the upper world, being the intelligible realm / world, and is mostly concerned with knowledge. So the allegory of the cave representing essentially the same thing as the divided line. And so really, we start off in the cave, bound in chairs, and we see really just mere images, or really shadows. So you write that down. Okay, and we could call this part of the cave the part of imagination. And so then, of course, we move to the next section of the cave. And this is the part where we actually see the fire, we unbound ourselves, and then we see the people actually projecting the figures. Excuse me. And we could call this part of the cave the part in which we have conviction / objects. Okay, so then really what the allegory of the cave, was supposed to do a little bit more than the divided line. Really, for the allegory of the cave, what we have is we have a sort of importance of education that Plato is really trying to convince us of. Really, the way or the allegory of the cave, what it's supposed to show is that we move from the cave to the outside through education. So one of the most important aspects of the allegory of the cave is the fact that we move to the cave, to the outside through education. So make sure to remember that. So once we actually move from the cave to the outside through education, we really stumble upon the intelligible realm slash the realm of knowledge. And for that first section, what we have is we have mathematics, or I should probably say before that really what the Allegory Cave is essentially saying is that we escape from the cave and are dazed by sunlight. What it's trying to represent is mathematics. So let me first write what the allegory of the cave is actually doing. So we escape from the cave, and we're dazed by sunlight. And then, of course, really the final part of the allegory of the cave is that we stop being dazed by the sunlight, and really we adjust to the sunlight. And really, this is the point in which we have dialectical reasoning. And so really that's about it for the allegory of the cave. We can clearly see how it's very similar to the divided line. We have the visible realm or the physical world with the intelligible realm. And then we move from imagination to convention slash objects. And then through education, we move outside of the cave to the real world. And then we have mathematics, in which we are still dazed by the sunlight, but then we finally adjust to the sunlight through dialectical reasoning. And of course, one can make further sort of illustrations, similarities. We can consider the realm of the outside, the realm of the higher forms. We can consider the cave the realm of the lower forms. And kind of a lot to digest slash write down. So I'll go ahead and give it a few minutes for you guys to write down. But that's pretty much it for the allegory of the cave. Okay, I'm going to assume everyone is all good. So I'll go ahead and erase it now. Okay, so now we move to number 8. See what number 8 is. Be able to identify basic characteristics of Aristotelian thought, teleology, unmoved mover, substance, arte, and eudaimonia. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with teleology. So for teleology, really what it is the study of end, purpose, or goal. And then, of course, we have the unmoved mover. Essentially, what Aristotle tries to gather from the unmoved mover is that it is the first causation of all things. Aristotle essentially believes that all things are caused by something else. And he surmised then that in order for things to be first caused, some higher being must have been there to cause the ultimate causation of everything else. And then we have substance. And really all you really need to know for substance is that it is form plus matter, and that substance is really a bearer of properties. Probably should define it first. The substance. And so definitely remember that substance is form plus matter. That will definitely be on your test. Exactly that. It will probably ask you, well, what is substance? Really what you should identify with substance is that it is form plus matter, and it's the bearer of properties. Then we have arte, which is living in accordance to virtue, and essentially another word for excellence. Then we have eudaimonia. Eudaimonia is essentially human flourishing. Okay, and so that's essentially it for the sort of ideas that Aristotle had. We have teleology, unmoved mover, substance, arte, eudaimonia. And I'll let it stand up there on the screen for just a little bit, and we'll go ahead and move on to number 9. Okay, I'm going to assume we're all good. We'll go ahead and move on to number 9. Okay, so number 9 is, does Aristotle agree with his teacher Plato regarding forms? What about the reason people do evil? What does each say about vice/evil behavior? Let's go ahead and go through that. Okay, so first off, Aristotle did not agree with Plato regarding the forms. Particularly, Aristotle believed that instead of the forms being in some sort of platonic heaven, instead the forms were straight up just within the physical realm instead of a platonic or intelligible realm that Aristotle or that Plato believed. Let me just extend this real quick. Okay, and so another big difference between Aristotle and Plato, and also Socrates, really, is that Plato believed that no person commits evil knowingly, whereas Aristotle believed that people can commit evil knowingly, and it's through something called, I'm probably going to butcher this, akrisia, which is essentially weakness of will. And so that really just about does it for number 9. So just remember that Aristotle did not agree with Plato regarding the forms. Really, the difference between the two is that Plato regarded the forms as being within a sort of intelligible realm, a realm that's not physical, whereas Aristotle believed that the forms do exist, however, they exist in the physical realm. And of course, they also differed massively on why people commit evil. Plato believed that no person commits evil knowingly, so that essentially all evil is due to some type of ignorance. Whereas Aristotle believed that people can commit evil due to ignorance, but they also can do it because of a chrysia, which is weakness of will. I forgot to put a in parentheses with that. Sorry about that. Now go ahead and leave that on for just a little bit, and we'll go on to number 10. Okay, I'm assuming everyone is done. We'll go ahead and go on to number 10. So number 10 is be able to list in sequential order the teacher-student relationship among the big 3 philosophers, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. So funny enough, the review essentially gives you the answer to number 10. So for number 10, the student or the teacher-student relationship goes as such. Socrates was the teacher of Plato, and Plato was the teacher of Aristotle. So Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. That's essentially all you need to know for number 10. So for number 11, let's see what number 11 is. Number 11, be able to list and explain the 4 causes. So a very important idea with Aristotle. Aristotle believed that there was 4 causes of metaphysics / ontology. He believed that these 4 causes is what essentially creates something, or that pushes something to become created. And we'll go ahead and go through that real quick. So 4 causes. Oops. Okay, so the first cause what we have is that we have a material cause, material that essentially makes up the thing. Okay, so then we have the second cause, which is the formal cause. It is essentially essence, which is basically what the thing strives to become. So we have the third cause. The third cause is the efficient cause, and is essentially the force that brings change. And then for the fourth final cause, which is named the final cause, essentially what it is the purpose of the thing. And then, of course, I just want to emphasize the importance of you to know that what substance is it is form plus matter. Okay, and that's about it for number 11. I'm sorry, guys. I actually do have to use the restroom real quick. And when I get back, we'll go ahead and move on to number 12, okay? Sorry about that. Okay, I'm sorry about that, guys. I had to use the restroom real quick. Is my mic fine? Can you guys hear me correctly?
Yes.
Yes, you're good.
Okay, great, awesome. So I'm assuming we have number 11 down. Let's go ahead and move on to number 12.
Question regarding number 3. Is that going to be the agent as he says in his lectures?
I'm sorry, do you mind repeating your question?
For the third cause, is that the creator? Is that the force, the creator, the agent? Is that what that is?
Yeah, essentially. So the force that brings change could be the creator, it could be a natural cause, it could really be anything. But yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's see what number 12 is. So for number 12, be able to list the 5 keys to understanding Aristotelian virtue. So pretty easy question. Let's go ahead and start with it. Extend this out. Okay, so what we have is we have number 1. Number 1 is essentially Morality is not implanted, it is learned. And then for number 2, what we have is we have virtues are habits. And then of course, number 3, one is not vicious and one is not virtuous by single actions alone. And then for number 4, we have habits define character. And then for the final one, we have training is important at a very young age for morality. That's essentially the key 5 concepts regarding Aristotle's ethics or virtues. Morality is not implanted; it is learned. Virtues are habits. One is not vicious or virtuous by a single action alone. Habits define character, and training is very important at an early age. Okay, I'm going to assume we're all good. So we'll go ahead and move on to number 13. So number 13 is be able to summarize, explain, and provide examples of Aristotle's golden mean in relation and its relation to virtue. Okay, so really the main aspect of Aristotle's ethics is essentially that virtue is a mean between deficiency and excess. And of course, we were talking about that a little bit when we were talking about the Platonic virtues. Plato has a very nice, rigid, set of virtues that one has to live by in order to be virtuous. It is, temperance, justice, wisdom, and courage. But really, Aristotle has a long list of virtues that one has to abide by. And really, what makes something virtuous is that it is a mean between deficiency and excess. We'll go ahead and go through 3 examples, of how he defines what a virtue is and what the deficiency and excess is of that particular virtue. So the first virtue that we'll go ahead and cover is courage. So really, let's see, how am I going to do this? I'll go ahead and make, I'll do the 3 virtues at once. Let's go ahead and make this section here. So we'll go ahead and run through the 3 virtues that I want to cover right now. So the deficiency of these 3 virtues is respectively cowardice, shameless, and stinginess. Okay, so cowardice, shameless, stinginess. And so the virtues that are associated with those deficiencies is courage, modesty, and generosity. So let me go ahead and write those down. Okay. And then, of course, the excess of those three virtues is foolhardiness, bashfulness, and profligacy. Okay, and so essentially what Aristotle does is he really kind of analyzes attributes or characteristics as they are, and he tries to come about ways in which how he can kind of separate out different attributes for being a deficiency, being an excess, and then trying to find a golden mean between those attributes. He finds a virtue. So, for example, he finds the virtue of courage as he surmises that the deficiency of courage or the deficiency of not acting is cowardice. The excess is foolhardiness. So having too much courage, not having any fear at all, and he kind of creates a mean of those two attributes, and then comes about the virtue of courage. The same thing with modesty. You have the deficiency of shamelessness, and then excess of bashfulness. So then we have the virtue of modesty, or being modest. Then, of course, generosity, we have stinginess being the deficiency, and then excess being profligacy. And of course, there's many other different virtues. I think you only need one example, so you could memorize just one of these. I would try to memorize at least three, just in case he asks for three different examples of virtue. But I think he won't ask you for more than three. So these might be sufficient to memorize for your test. And I'll leave it up just for a little bit. Okay, we'll go ahead and we'll move on to number 14. So number 14 is be able to list the Aristotle's signs of life from top to bottom. Here's a reminder, blah, blah, blah. So really just be able to list Aristotle's sign of life from top to bottom. Okay, so really this one is actually very simple. Really what we have is we have rationality and creativity at the very top. And really it's the most valuable sort of characteristics slash signs of life. Oops, most valuable. Make this a bit bigger. So we have really the top of the sign of life. Really, we have rationality plus creativity, and that really belongs to humans in particular. And so then what we have is we have motion and the five senses. Which essentially humans and animals have that. And then finally, we have nutrition and reproduction, in which animals, humans, and plants have that. I probably should start with humans. Okay, so that's really all you need to know for number 14. Just realize that it's rationality, creativity for humans, motion plus the 5 senses for humans and animals, nutrition plus reproduction for humans, animals, and plants. I'll just give it just a little bit. Okay, so I'll go ahead and erase it. We'll go ahead and move on to number 15 now. And so number 15 is be able to define and identify the differences between theism, pantheism, and panentheism. So really for theism, the God/universe essentially exists independently. However, they can both affect each other. And then we have a pantheism in which God is the universe. And then we have a panentheism in which the universe is contained within God. Okay, that's about it for number 15. I'll give it a few seconds and we'll move on to number 16.
Can you explain what the difference is between God is the universe and the universe is contained within God?
Yeah, so essentially for theism, the God/universe exists independently. God may very well, be in some other realm that isn't necessarily within the realm of the universe, but instead they exist, independently. For panentheism, the universe is contained within God. Essentially, the physical realm, as i.e., the universe, could be contained within God, or is contained within God, but God sort of uh, is beyond that of the physical realm. It sort of contains, maybe other realms. God is, something more than just, mere physical. It could be something like, an abstract realm. It could be, a totally different type of reality. Essentially, theism, God/universe exists independently. One could be in one realm, one could be in the other. Pantheism, God is essentially the universe, and panentheism, God could contain, a whole lot of other things than just the physical universe.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And so we probably should be done with that. Let's go ahead and move to number 16. So for number 16, be able to distinguish theism from atheism and agnosticism. So let's go ahead and go through that. So for theism, really what it's trying to do, or what it essentially purports, is that God does exist. There is an existence of God. Excuse me. And for atheism, we have a rejection of theism. And then for agnosticism, agnosticism is very different from atheism. Agnosticism might not even deny that there is a God, but what it denies is that we are able to even obtain knowledge of that there is an existence of a God. So essentially, the existence of deities is unknowable. So theism, we can see that as a statement that there is an existence of God. Atheism is rejection of theism, so it's a rejection that there is an existence of God. And then agnosticism essentially isn't saying that God does or does not exist, but that simply we either do not have the necessary means available to us right now to find out that there's a God, or that there will never be an instance in which we can find out that there is an existence of a deity. Okay, and we'll go ahead and move on to number 17 now. So for number 17, be able to identify the theistic religions. So we'll go through that real quick. Really, it's your three main Abrahamic religions, right? It's Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So very simple, number 17. The three theistic religions, just remember they're the three Abrahamic religions. They are Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Okay, and we'll go ahead and we'll move on to number 18 now. So for number 18, be familiar with the attributes of God presented in the traditional conception of God in the theistic religions. The aforementioned theistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So we'll go ahead and go through those attributes of God. So traditional conception of God. So really what we have is we have omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, and omnibenevolent. And I'll go ahead and define what those mean. Omnipotent is really being all powerful. And omnipresent, of course, means that they're all places at once. And then omnibenevolent is all good. So yeah, so really your basic, conceptions of God, the four main ones being all powerful, all knowing, all places, and all good. Excuse me. Okay, I'll assume everyone's done. Let's go ahead and move on to number 19. So number 19 is going to be a pretty long one. Essentially states that be able to identify the arguments for God and their origins, if knowable. Are these arguments a priori or a posteriori? Which, if any, do you find persuasive? Be able to explain how a theist might respond to the leaky bucket analogy regarding the arguments for God. In other words, how this problem might be addressed in a helpful manner. So I will be excluding one part of the question out, which is which, if any, do you find persuasive? I don't want to tell you, personally what you have to find persuasive or not, right? That's kind of like your own thing. You can say, hey, not a whole lot of them are persuasive. You can say that, oh, well, the ontological argument or the argument from causation is the most persuasive. Whatever you find mostly persuasive. Okay. So really what I want to start with is a sort of explanation. It states that it wants to know which of the arguments are a priori and a posteriori. And I want to go ahead and define what exactly those terms mean, because they can be quite tricky. But they're very similar to rationalism and empiricism, right? So for a priori, essentially what it states is that a proposition is known independently of experience. Okay, so a priori proposition is known independently of experience, and a posteriori is the exact opposite. A proposition is known on the basis of experience. So really, the best thing to know, or the best thing to note, to differentiate a priori and a posteriori is kind of think a priori as before the senses, before experience. What can we rationalize independently of experience that would allow us to know something? And then a posteriori is, after the senses. It's, what can we know based off of the experiences that we have? And we'll definitely go through which of the arguments are exactly a priori and a posteriori in a little bit. So really what I want to do is I want to note the 5 arguments that the question is really wanting to know, what the arguments are. So the first one is the argument from motion. So the argument from motion essentially is the unmoved mover argument. It's what essentially Aristotle comes up with. Essentially that there has to be a mover of all the motion in the universe. Then we have the second argument, which is argument from causation. God is needed to cause existence. And so one should probably note that really Aristotle kind of touches on this a little bit as well through his argument for motion, unmoved mover argument. Essentially, God is not only an unmoved mover, but also that he sort of causes all things within existence as well. And while Aristotle might touch on this, a little bit, within his argument from motion, really the person who really expands upon it is Al-Ghazali. And we'll go ahead and I'll make sure to list all of the authors of these arguments later on. And so really the third argument is argument from contingent objects, that God is needed to create contingent objects. Then we have the fourth argument, which is argument of perfection. God is the perfect being and represents the maximum of goodness. And then we have our final argument, which is the argument from intelligent design, a very famous argument, an argument that is used, especially nowadays, to purport the existence of God. Essentially, what it states is that there must be a God to coordinate and fix the end of all entities. Okay, so now that we're done with sort of identifying what the five arguments are, I'm now going to explain which ones are a priori, which ones are a posteriori, and what the which authors came up with the arguments themselves. So we'll go ahead and go through. And of course, number one is supposed to represent the argument from motion. Number two, argument from causation, so forth and so on. So number one is a posteriori. And of course, as I said before, that one's author is Aristotle. Number two is a posteriori again, and its author is Al-Ghazali. Number three is a posteriori again, and that is Thomas Aquinas. And number four, funnily enough, is the only a priori argument, and that is the ontological argument. That is, of course, by Anselm. And number five, of course, is a posteriori, and that is by Thomas Aquinas as well. Okay, and now it's time to go to the, I believe, the third part of the question, which is essentially trying to explain, the leaky bucket analogy or thought experiment. So really, the main problem with these arguments is that these arguments alone have lots of holes in them. They don't explain something about reality. Argument from motion doesn't explain how all things came to be as they are. However, when you pair the argument from motion with the argument from intelligent design, you start to realize that, oh, well, the two are trying to explain each other a little bit better. One explains more than the other, or in their own right, explains something about reality. And the same can be said about all the other arguments. Some arguments just don't explain something about reality, and then another argument comes in to sort of remedy that fault or that um, problem. So let me go ahead and surmise that. So these arguments alone have holes in them. However, when taken together, will cover up each other's holes, problems, to make a cohesive account for the existence of God. And so really, that's it for number 19. Sorry, that was, a pretty, huge one. But that's essentially it. Again, I kind of skipped over that one part of the problem in which you're supposed to identify which of them you find persuasive. That's totally, your own personal, opinion. Not, if that question is asked on the test, probably not going to get a right or wrong answer, but definitely try to explain yourself on why exactly it's persuasive. Don't just say, oh, well, I find this one in particular persuasive. Explain why it's persuasive to you. I'll go ahead and leave this up for about a minute, 30 seconds. And then we'll move on to number 20.
Can you expand on number 3, the argument from causation?
Yeah, so essentially the argument from, or do you mean the argument from contingent objects?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, so essentially, God is supposed to make contingent objects. Essentially, God is supposed to make sort of objects within the universe that are real, that are not necessarily that are sort of hard to come by in nature alone. Sort of like human beings. We're intelligent life. That would be a sort of contingent object in a way. It's essentially just objects that are just hard to come by from nature alone. Is essentially what it means. You probably don't need to expand on it too much. You just need to know, of course, that there is an argument from contingent objects and that it's a posteriori and from Thomas Aquinas. Yeah, it's really just contingent objects are just really hard to come by. Nature alone. And they're real objects, and they sort of give an inclination that a god was to cause those objects instead of nature alone.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to assume everyone has this written down. We'll go ahead and move on to number 20. Okay, so for number 20, it is what does it mean to say an argument is defeasible, indefeasible? I'll go ahead and go through that really quickly. So a defeasible argument is an argument that can be the case until proven otherwise. And of course, an indefeasible argument is logically consistent, and to reject it will be irrational. And of course, we can think of many different examples for defeasible and indefeasible arguments. A defeasible argument, an argument that can be the case until proven otherwise, can be something like um, there was an initial cause for the Big Bang, for example. That argument can be the case until proven otherwise. It would be an argument in which it is most probably the case, but it could very well not be the case until it's proven otherwise. It could be the case that the universe is actually quite infinite, that the Big Bang is not necessarily the creation of the universe itself. It's just the creation of our local sort of galaxies or universe. So yeah, and so then an indefeasible argument that's logically consistent, to reject it would be irrational. Something like that would be well, the sun exists, right? It's logically consistent. We can appeal to our experiences. We can appeal to rationality. That's pretty set in stone that the sun, it does exist, and to reject that would be irrational. You are sort of opposing an axiomatic premise of an argument. It's indefeasible. To reject it is completely irrational. It's something that you probably shouldn't believe, of course. So yeah, that's really the difference between defeasible and indefeasible. Assuming everyone has that, so we'll go ahead and move to number 21. So number 21, according to McDowell, what is the biggest weakness for all the arguments for God? So we'll go ahead and go through that. So really, the biggest weakness of all the arguments for God, which is the ones that we examined earlier, with the 5 arguments for God, is that the arguments alone will not get you to theism. So one thing that should be noted is that really the 5 arguments for God, they will give an existence, they will give reasons to believe that there is an existence of a higher being, right? But it doesn't really say anything about particular religions, right? Really, they could, for Aristotle in particular, his arguments could very well have been used to, prove the existence of the Greek pantheon. For Thomas Aquinas, his arguments for God could have been proposed to, essentially give evidence for that there's a Christian God. For Al-Ghazali, could have been, his God. Each of the 5 arguments for God philosophically give us reason to believe that there is an existence of a deity, but they do not give reason to believe any particular religion. And really, the weakness of the 5 arguments is that what the authors, what they're trying to prove is the existence of their own God, but their ultimate weakness is that although philosophy can do a lot in regards to showing, that there is some evidence, for a God, what you really need is you need religion to cover the gap of between philosophy and specific religions. So that's really their main weakness. These arguments alone will not get you to theism. You still need some religion in order to get to an argument to where you can say, yes, well, the Christian God is real, or the Islamic God, is the true God, or the Judaist God, or the Jewish God is the real God. or the Hindu gods, or God is the real God, such gods. It's you still need religion in order to come about certain conclusions about religion. So that's really it for number 21. Just remember that these arguments alone will not get you to theism. You still need a bit of religion to prove theism / religion. Okay, so for number 22, number 22 is please explain the differences between theism, atheism, and agnosticism, and what ways can you identify that strong atheism and Christian theism are similar? So let's go ahead and let's do that. So really for theism, we kind of went through this a little bit earlier, but we'll go through it a little bit again. So theism is the belief in the existence of God. And for atheism is a disbelief or lack of belief in the existence of God. And note how for atheism in particular, really you have two main aspects or ways to go about atheism. Atheism could very well purport to say, well, there simply is no existence of God. Or you can simply say for atheism, which would be more a weak atheism, is you can say that, well, I don't necessarily believe that there is a non-existence of God. But what I will say is that I have a lack of belief in the existence of God. There's not enough evidence for me to conclude that there is an existence of God or that there is an existence of God, right? So it's we have a sort of dichotomy within atheism that in which we can clearly see that there is a sort of strong atheism and then there's a weak atheism. And then for agnosticism, really it's the belief that knowledge of deities is unattainable. And so really, probably one of the main distinctions between these three, has to be with atheism and agnosticism, right? Theism is pretty, clear and cut. There's a belief in the existence of God. Atheism is that there's a disbelief or lack of belief in the existence of God. But then agnosticism is the belief that knowledge of deities is unattainable, right? So really, atheism and agnosticism, they're really saying two very different things, right? Atheism, again, you could very well believe that you could purport to say that there is no existence of a God. Or you could say that, well, there's simply not enough evidence for me to conclude that there is a God or that there is not a God. Whereas agnosticism simply takes the stance that belief and knowledge of deities is totally unattainable. It's not really saying that, there is a belief in God, that there isn't a belief in God, or that there is an existence of God and there is an existence of God and there is not an existence of God. Really, it's just saying that, well, it could be the case, but we'll never have the knowledge available to conclude something like that. So that's really the main difference. You should definitely pay attention close to the difference between atheism and agnosticism, because theism, again, very clear cut, there is an existence of God. And so really, the second part of the question is that what are the sort of similarities between strong theism and strong atheism? And really, what I want you to know is that for weak atheism, which is that there's a lack of belief in the existence of God, and agnosticism is that they're not purporting to anything about the existence of God at all. They're not saying that there is an existence of God that there is an existence of God, really what they're saying is that there's just not enough evidence. And so the main similarities between strong atheism and strong theism is that essentially both require a belief which needs to be supported. So remember from your logic section, where conclusions, they need to be supported with premises, with evidence. So as an atheist, if one is a strong atheist, if one says that there is no existence of God, well, one still needs to prove that. It's a proposition, it's a conclusion, it needs to be supported. The same thing with the strong theist. If one believes that there is in fact a God, then one needs to support that with evidence, right? But again, there's a difference between weak atheism and agnosticism, in which it's not really purporting anything about the existence of God. It's just saying that there's a lack of belief. There's not enough evidence, right? So I'm assuming we're have that all written down. Let's go ahead and go to number 23. So for number 23, according to Dr. McDowell, what are the three big bangs that one must be able to explain if a divine being is excluded? So let's go ahead and go through that. Okay, so really the three big bangs that one needs to explain if one excludes a deity from one sort of philosophy or worldview is that how do you go from nothing to something? So one. How do you go from nothing to something? So essentially explaining, well, what was the cause of the Big Bang? You know, the theist might conjure up the argument from causation, argument from unmoved mover, in order to support the idea that, well, it was God in which caused nothing to go into something. Whereas the sort of naturalists, the strong atheists, and even the weak atheist and agnostic needs to be able to come about a way in which nothing turns into something. How does that happen? So for number 2, we have, how do you go from no life to life? And that's pretty straightforward. How do you go from just mere atoms, mere chemicals, sort of within the universe, and mere rocks and so forth? How do you go from that to actual eukaryotic, prokaryotic, or not necessarily prokaryotic, more so eukaryotic sort of cells? How do you go from no life to life in particular? So number 3, how do you go from life to intelligent life? And that's straightforward as well. Okay, so we are able to explain, how something comes from nothing to something, no life to life. But even if we explain those two aspects of reality, how is it that we go from life to intelligent life? How do we get to things like the faculty of reason or experience or sentience and so forth? So really, these are the main 3 big bangs that you should memorize. It's how do you go from nothing to something? How do you go from no life to life? How do you go from life to intelligent life? We'll go ahead and we'll give that a few seconds. Everyone has it written down, and then we'll go on to number 24. Okay, go ahead and go to number 24. So number 24 is, what is the philosophical problem of evil? Who it's a problem for? Why? Provide 3 philosophical attempts, theodicies, to address the problem. So just as how the naturalist, the strong atheist, the weak atheist, the agnostic, sort of has some explaining to do in regards to the nature of reality, through the three big bangs. The same thing can be said of the theist. The Jewish, Christian, and Islamic, sort of religions. They have something to explain, and that particularly is the problem or the question of why does evil exist? And again, this is a problem for theists in particular. And so you'll remember from our 5 conceptions of God, in which God is all powerful, all knowing, all places at once, and even more so than that, all good. So if we have this sort of being that is all of that, why is it then that we have a reality in which there is things like suffering? Why is there evil? Why are people committed to do wrong? Why is there constantly bad things that happen throughout our history? Why do these things occur? This is a distinct problem for the theist. And so really what the theist comes up with is really 3 theodicies to explain it. And essentially what it is it's free will, soul making, and God works in mysterious ways. So of course, I'll expand upon these, a little bit further. So why does evil exist? The theist might, for example, bring the point that God has created us with free will. God might not want to make us mere puppets. Instead, what he would want us to do is make our own choices as human beings, be able to choose between good and evil, be able to choose between different kinds of goods, different kinds of evils. He wanted to really give us free will in order for us to make our own destiny, not be mere puppets. And of course, we have soul making, the other theodicy. Essentially, what this states is that without evil, it could be the case that without it, we might not be able to be better. Might not be able to, say, overcome challenges and reflect upon those overcoming of challenges and create virtues within ourselves to become better people. Without adversity, how are we supposed to grow as human beings? So soul making, essentially, God permits evil so that we can grow, so that we can become good. And one thing that should be noted is that, for this theodicy in particular, it's not saying that God creates evil, but that God permits evil. So it's not necessarily God creating the evil, but he simply permits it. And of course, God works in mysterious ways. That's pretty straightforward. Um, you know, we might not be able to understand, sort of in an agnostic point of view, we might not even be able to understand why God, has created evil within the world. Maybe it's some, reason that we'll never truly know. So essentially, really, for number 24, it's, from a perfect being, why is there a world of evil? That's the main problem. One can surmise that as, saying, the question of why does evil exist? This is a problem for the theist, and the theodicies that a theist can make to combat this question is that there's free will, soul making, and that God works in mysterious ways. That's essentially it for number 24. And finally, I know it's been quite a while, guys. Thank you guys for holding out till the last question. Number 25, we have the be ready to explain the philosophical connections and conversations that is going on, one from the pre-Socratic philosophers to medieval philosophers. You might consider developing a concept map for this. Of course, if you use a concept map, there will be a need to be some textual explanation as well. So I was talking with McDowell on how to best go about this problem for you guys. And really, I'll give you guys a sort of one example on how you guys might address this problem. So for example, for mine, I have from Heraclitus and Parmenides, we have an influence on Socrates and Plato. So you have Heraclitus and Parmenides. Go ahead and just make it their initials. What each of them sort of, how they influence Socrates and Plato. I guess Heraclitus's changes the nature of reality, and Parmenides being there is no change to reality. So change is the nature of reality. Let me just fix this real quick. So what we have, I moved last second. Okay, well, but from Heraclitus and Parmenides, we get the realization that changes the nature of reality, and that being there is no change to reality. And really what that does is that influences Plato and Aristotle, or Plato and Socrates. Sorry about that. Let's see, how should I do that? Let's just go down like this. Really what that does is that influences Socrates and Plato. And then from Socrates and Plato, we get things such as the just soul, just city analogy, the allegory of the cave, chariot analogy, so forth. So we have just city / soul, JTB theory, divided line, chariot analogy. So then from Socrates and Plato, what we have a influence on Aristotle. And of course, Aristotle comes up with his own ideas, such as the unmoved mover, the golden mean, teleology, nominalism. Actually, I'll just put A for Aristotle. And then unmoved mover, nominalism, golden mean, teleology. And of course, from Aristotle, we get many of the medieval philosophers. In particular, which one should I focus on mostly? We could focus on Thomas Aquinas, for example, mostly. Thomas Aquinas was heavily inspired by Aristotle. He would create Aristotelianism, as well as the 5 arguments for the existence of God. That's essentially, I forgot to say his name. Sorry about that. Let me type that in. Thomas Aquinas.
H and P is Heraclitus and Parmenides.
Parmenides, yes.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah, no problem. So essentially, this is a very, simple sort of outline of what you guys could do. Definitely, focus in on, um, I would personally focus in on Heraclitus and Parmenides. I mean, those guys in particular were the ones who really influenced Plato and Socrates the most. We see that within the divided line. You could definitely make an example of that, how Heraclitus Parmenides influenced the Socrates and Plato's idea of the divided line, JTB theory, Charionology even, and then from Socrates and Plato, we have an influence on Aristotle. Aristotle sort of rejected many of the ideas of Plato. He would say that instead of the forms being within an intelligible realm, they're instead in a physical realm. He developed the golden. Oh, actually, I spelled golden wrong. I'm sorry about that, guys. But it's golden mean in teleology. And then from Aristotle, we get many different philosophers, medieval philosophers, who were influenced by him. You could say Thomas Aquinas. You could say Anselm, Augustine. You could do it in a number of different ways, but just make sure that you really, harp on the fact that from the pre-Socratics, you have an influence of Socrates and Plato, then an influence of Aristotle, and then an influence of the medieval philosophers. And kind of go into, what specifically they would influence each other on, or the one below, what specifically they influenced. And really, then you should be totally fine for number 25. But definitely make sure you explain yourself thoroughly. Definitely not like this, definitely, go into a little bit more detail on what exactly they influence. Why it is the case that they influenced it, of course, and how they relate to each other. Then you should be good. And so that just about does it, guys, for the review. Thank you guys so much for coming. I'm sorry it was pretty late. This was kind of a long one. Very abstract ideas, from Plato, even Aristotle. And I hope you guys, do well on your tests. Do well, guys.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yep,
Thank you.
no problem. And I'm here also for any questions you guys might have. I'm totally fine to answer them.
Mr. Galwan, I have a question.
Oh, yes, sir.
How do you identify a posteriorion and a priori?
Oh, yes, sir. So essentially, a priori, a proposition can be known outside of experience.
Outside the experience.
Yes, sir. So essentially through reason. And a posteriori is a proposition can be known through experience.
Okay, in reality. Okay.
Yes, through the five senses, essentially.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.